A round of applause for President.
Applaudissons pour le président Ousmane. S'il vous plaît, regagnez vos places.
Let me just take a few moments to recognize all of us leaders who are present here and to again welcome you to Nairobi and Kenya to this historic meeting, because I am a great believer that we are at a historic juncture in world development in which Africa is emerging as a focal point of important global discourse. This is therefore a crucial opportunity for us in Africa to define the terms and conditions under which we shall pursue African self-sufficiency in order to actualize the African right to self-determination. I see this as an underlying expectation as well as the fundamental philosophy of the Africa we want. The cardinal aspirations underpinning the Africa Union's Agenda 2063 are the output of sustained deliberation. They also require us to engage in deeper analysis through inclusive deliberation in order to clarify the path by which Africa will arrive at its place as the global economic powerhouse of the very near future. It often appears as though matters canvassed at the AU level are purely and exclusively intergovernmental. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. The economy, development, and self-sufficiency are multisectoral and interconnected concerns that must be pursued through collaboration and consultation by all stakeholders in the public as well as the private sectors at the domestic, regional, as well as continental levels. It is through robust dialogue, guided by this understanding, that we have made progress in developing and implementing a blueprint for the realization of Africa's aspirations. Recognizing that the contribution of the private sector is vital to Africa's socio-economic transformation and that its voice must define the dialogue about integration and economic reliance is a major component of our mission, not just in this meeting, but on a mission as a people and as a continent. This event, which is designed to underscore and promote the private sector's involvement in the achievement of Agenda 2063, is therefore of particular importance. Everyone who has participated in organizing this event and everyone who is taking part in these proceedings is making a significant contribution in moving the agenda forward by enhancing the role of an indispensable dimension of development, the private sector. This is why I'm delighted and grateful that you have all honored our invitation to the African Private Sector Dialogue. I welcome you all to Kenya's capital city of Nairobi, and on behalf of the people of Kenya, extend a very warm welcome to you all. Coming at a time when the Africa Union heads of state and governments have set the pace for the effective implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, this dialogue provides a crucial forum for collective reflection on matters of vital significance. I am glad for this opportunity that we shall have at this dialogue to share experiences on past endeavors, to understand regional integration, assess the current status of ongoing processes, and use the best of our collective knowledge to forge the way into the future of African prosperity. The increasingly complicated, delicate, and uncertain geopolitical environment has exerted disruptive pressures upon global trading systems. Emanating from such diverse events as Brexit in 2016, whose effects continue to reverberate throughout world economies, the World Trade Organization's Doha negotiations that remain unconcluded, escalating protectionism, and more recently, the COVID pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and of course, the climate crisis that we all face. The shocks and stresses arising from these events have exacerbated the vulnerability of African economies and intensified poverty and suffering. The Russia-Ukraine conflict alone has disorganized food and energy supply chains which serve our continent, causing acute shortage and driving commodity prices to unprecedented levels that are unaffordable to the majority of our people. This complicated crisis must alert us to the unacceptable reality that as matters presently stand, our economies and societies are prone to the negative impacts of events taking place in lands very far away from us. This reality arises due to two primary facts that go into the heart of the Agenda 2063 aspirations generally and the ACFTA in particular. First, Africa urgently needs to work its way steadily and rapidly up from the bottom of the global value chains by unlocking the full potential of our abundant endowments of minerals, energy, natural resources, and human capital through industrialization, mining processes, and manufacturing. 60% of global arable land reserves are in Africa, and we have not begun to fully utilize. African exports are among the world's least diversified, with commodities accounting for over 60% of the total merchandise export in 45 of the 55 countries. This situation exposes us quite badly to global commodity price shocks, effectively undermining the continent's prospects for inclusive growth and development. Secondly, intra-Africa trade is remarkably low at 17% compared to 40% in Asia, 60% in the Americas, and 70% in Europe. The bulk of Africa's imports and exports relate to markets outside the continent. Although Africa has been a net importer of agricultural commodities since the year 2000, 81% of these imports come from outside Africa, while 78% of its exports are destined for the rest of the world, not Africa. We must be intentional and deliberate about rehabilitating our economy as a continent from these grave deficiencies in order to correct the obvious vulnerability that they cause. A little disruption in the supply chain causes major shocks of imports of commodities and export of the same. We have a highly promising opportunity to sustain a robust conversation about resilience, generate strong consensus regarding self-sufficiency, and design policies and strategies that will direct public and private investments towards competitive efficiencies, increasing employment, creating wealth, and making sure that we are less vulnerable as a continent. A major enabler of continental economic takeoff requiring considerable investment is infrastructure. Low infrastructure connectivity is a serious impediment of our ambition to realize Africa's full trade and economic growth potential. Consequently, this dialogue provides the perfect occasion to align government and private sector complementarity with the colossal demand for port, rail, road, and air transport, power and energy, as well as information communication and technology infrastructure. Here is the opportunity in more detail. With appropriate levels of connectivity, Africa's digital economy is projected at US dollars 180 billion by 2025, or 5.2% of the continent's GDP. That's just technology. And US dollars 720 billion by 2050, or 8.5% of African GDP. And here is the infrastructure demand in context. Lack of efficient transport networks increases the price of goods traded among African countries by between 30 and 40%, rendering Africa effectively uncompetitive and eliminating the opportunity for us to trade merely because of logistics. You've heard from my Minister for Trade that tea, which was supposed to take 3 weeks or less to get to Ghana, took 3 months. Because it didn't go to Ghana. It went the opposite direction first because of transport logistics. Bearing in mind that 16 African countries are landlocked, underdeveloped transport connectivity hampers intra-Africa trade and drives up the cost of imports and exports with regard to other parts of the world. To further illustrate this point, I remind you of the confinement, which I just said, of value-added Kenyan tea destined for Ghana, which left, and I was there with Mbele, which left Nairobi on the 5th of October, but it got to the port of Tema in February the next year. The current level of lack of connectivity is a great impediment to our progress as a continent. And therefore, the Agenda 2063, which speaks with clarity on what type of infrastructure that we need to be able to connect our countries, eliminate the barriers that are erected by our boundaries, and human capital and human beings who hamper trade. These are unnecessary impediments to trade and investment in our region. The current level of technology in the fields of infrastructure development across sectors is fairly high. This dialogue is a golden opportunity for African private sector and African governments to deploy the concept of technology leapfrogging, thereby ensuring that advanced technologies are incorporated into priority infrastructure investments. Similarly, the implementation of the single African air transport market must be attended to in this dialogue with particular urgency. Already there is a conversation between Kenya, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, on how we can consolidate our air transport and have a regional airline that can move people, that can move goods, that can move services across our region without the current unnecessary impediments caused by air transport fragmentation. Similarly, the implementation of this will define the opportunities for private sector to invest in a liberalized air transport sector and enhance our air traffic penetration from the current 14.5%. African integration will also benefit significantly from this endeavor. The overarching methodology of the Africa we want is to transcend all the shortcomings, gaps, and vulnerabilities currently impeding Africa's progress and potential by redefining them as transformational opportunities for private-public collaboration. Public-private partnerships have the potential to augment the program for infrastructure development as well as the African Development Bank's initiative to facilitate projects aimed at bridging the continent's infrastructure gap to sustainably support connectivity. I will give you an example. We're now diversifying on how to transport energy. We do not have to invest as government on transmission lines. We believe the private sector can invest in transmission lines so that we can pay a willing charge as government, leverage on the expertise of the private sector, on the resources of the private sector, enhance private sector capacity to be able to work with us as governments on the delivery of public programs, whether it is supply of energy, whether it is transmission of energy, or in the case of Kenya, we are now having a whole program on how to deliver water on a water purchase agreement instrument that allows the private sector to work with us in ensuring that we can deliver water, drinking, for irrigation, for use by livestock, to our people. And therefore, there is opportunity for the private sector to work with the public in areas that were considered strictly public goods space. I trust that I have adequately made out the case for the high level of expectations I have in connection with this dialogue. I anticipate your recommendations and policy proposals on the best methods of developing Africa's transcontinental and interregional infrastructure. I also expect that this dialogue will propose optimal private-public partnership frameworks to accelerate our infrastructure development agenda. This moment requires us to be bold and ambitious in fashioning our way up from the bottom of the global trade, productivity, and industrialization. I encourage you to extend your deliberations into such possibilities as African shipping lines, dedicated cargo airlines, and a network of trans-Africa railway lines laid down by each country across its territory that connect seamlessly across our borders. We are currently having a conversation between Kenya, Uganda, DRC, including Congo Brazzaville, to see how we can connect the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic. I think there is only a section of 1,000 kilometers of rail, and that should be connected. And as countries, we are prepared to work on it together, that we can do our section in Kenya. Uganda are already working on their section. We are discussing with the government of DRC to see how together we can get the resources to get the 1,000 kilometers in DRC connected into the Congo River and transport our goods and products across the heartland of Africa. A vital area that I will expect this dialogue to effectively address is the matter of sustainable financing. The opportunity is ripe for governments to collaborate with the private sector and establish a strong institution capable of de-risking African infrastructure development financing. The partnership between Afrexim Bank and ACFTA Secretariat for purposes of establishing an adjustment fund is timely, highly appropriate, and commendable. Such a fund would cushion countries against short-term revenue losses and support eligible private sector firms to upscale operational capacity in order to undertake projects and other opportunities on a continental scale. It is also imperative that we proactively seek a resolution to the disparities in currencies and the consequential impediments it poses to intra-African trade. trade, ladies and gentlemen, cannot take place without efficient and a unified payment system. Although there has been introduction of several regional payment infrastructure in the continent, we lack a single system that seamlessly facilitates trade among all our nations, eliminating the obstacles posed by varying currencies. I am, however, delighted to note that Afreximbank, in its mandate to facilitate intra-Africa and extra-Africa trade, embarked on building a centralized payment and settlement system to support trade under the ACFTA. It is called the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. Banks and payment providers can plug directly to it to enable secure and instant payment in local currency. The system is designed to reduce or eliminate the challenges of cross-border payments and by so doing, accelerate intra-Africa trade. Let me say this. I think it is important for the trade ministers who are here. We are all struggling, and all our businessmen are struggling, and our traders are struggling to make payments for goods and services from one country to another because of differences in currencies. And in the middle of all this, we are all subjected to a dollar environment. Kenyans want to pay for Tanzanian goods in dollars. Tanzania wants to pay for DRC goods in dollars. Egypt wants to pay. Why are we bringing dollars in the middle of our trade? This is the question we should be asking ourselves. And in the process, all our business people are stranded. Egypt cannot pay for our tea because they are looking for dollars. We cannot pay for their sugar because we are also looking for dollars. You know? And this is I had a conversation with President Orama of the Afreximbank, and they have built a mechanism where all our traders can trade in the local currency, and we leave it to the Afreximbank to settle all the payments in local currency. We do not have to look for dollars. Our businessmen, our business people, our traders will concentrate on moving goods and services and leave the arduous task of currencies to Afreximbank. I know we are all trying to see because of what the dollar has done to all our economies. The dollar has moved from less than 1% in the US to about 5.2%. With that movement, and I am told it is the steepest rise in interest rates ever since the US established their mechanism. That steep rise has caused us unnecessary trouble. I think it is important for us to figure out. Many of us are saying, oh, maybe we should move away from the dollar to the yuan. Maybe we should move away from the dollar to another currency. I suggest that we have a mechanism where we can settle all our payments, whether between our countries or externally, using our local currencies, and we have a mechanism like the one that has been put up by the Afrexim to settle all that so that we don't have to be hostage to any one currency or the other. Without a single payment platform, payment instructions from one African country to another typically passes through several intermediary financial institutions, leading to increased costs, complications, problems, and unnecessary currency fluctuations, and ends up being a whole ecosystem of confusion. Additionally, The time has come to introduce Pan-African insurance agencies and other African institutions to opportunities in the SCFTA market. My brother Mbele, you have a job to do. But first of all, we must take decisive steps to strengthen our financial institutions to effectively support a strong private sector performance in the SCFTA and general Pan-African business. There is an ample body of best practice from successful regional integration experiences, like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Southern Common Markets, which establishes that the full benefits of regional trade agreements can only be maximized when member states prioritize trade facilitation, especially the ease of cross-border activity. Non-tariff barriers distort investment dynamics and impede competitiveness. As a result, non-tariff barriers effectively undermine or even invalidate a free trade area. This is why we must take such barriers as weak transport and logistics capacity, customs-related delays, rules of origin, import bans and export restrictions, quotas and levies, technical barriers, import permits and licenses very seriously, because they ultimately reverse all the steps we try to make towards a free trade area. They may look small, they may look incremental, but they are sum total amounts to a reversal of what we are all trying to achieve. I was giving an example of the private sector this morning of, Uganda is our second best trading partner with Kenya. But you find some bureaucrats. President Museveni had to call me about 2 days ago to ask me about Uganda milk that had challenges coming into Kenya. Yet we have all manner of products we are exporting to Uganda. These kind of non-tariff barriers ultimately amount to undermining our free trade area. And we must be vigilant to make sure that such small steps do not amount to whole barriers. As I said, for SCFTA to be effective, this dialogue must make it clear that a free trade area is precisely that, free trade area, period. It should not mean anything else. Other critical outputs expected from this dialogue span such a broad range of areas as labor mobility, protection of domestic investors, governance of state-owned enterprises, competition policy, and climate action. I take this opportunity to appreciate the good work of the ministers and their technical teams in concluding all SCFTA instruments necessary for commencement of preferential trade, notably the agreement establishing the SCFTA as well as the protocols on trade in goods, trade in services, resolution of disputes, investments, competition policy, and intellectual property rights, as well as all other protocols that support the implementation of the free trade area. Further, I am encouraged to note the progress in ongoing discussions to develop the equally essential protocols of e-commerce, women and youth in trade, and other programs that will be explained to you in the course of your retreat. By these instruments, we underscore our commitment as Africa to inclusive trade that recognizes and empowers vulnerable and traditionally marginalized segments of the population who often bear the brunt of poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment, and signal as a continent our agenda to leverage ICT and the internet to accelerate trade and integration. Even as we appreciate the achievements in concluding these protocols, I recognize the outstanding issues, particularly as pertains the protocols on trade in goods and trade in services that must be resolved for the efficient implementation of SCFTA. I am very confident that the men and women who are in this meeting, the 29 ministers present and all the other delegations, will be able to resolve these issues for the bigger picture for us to move into the future. These outstanding issues are the reason why the ministerial retreat has been convened. I encourage ministers to utilize this opportunity to make progress towards concluding these issues in a manner that is both consistent with the objectives of SCFTA, facilitates its efficient implementation, and is beneficial to our continent. Please, good people, do not let us down. We are banking on you because this progress is urgent, is necessary, and is important. As I do so, I take this opportunity to congratulate the countries which have taken the tremendous step of signing and ratifying the SCFTA, and to encourage those in the process of doing so to undertake this noble and historic mandate as soon as possible in order to pave way for the next global economic powerhouse, a seamless African market. This is also a chance to recognize that the guided trading initiative formulated to accelerate the implementation of the SCFTA did launch, and that Kenya was among the earliest exporters under the initiative. Since then, a number of countries have joined the initiative and commenced their exports. I encourage those countries that have not yet joined the initiative to do so and explore the wonderful free trade possibilities that they will be able to promptly access. Further, I challenge our ministers as they deliberate on the most appropriate resolutions to the outstanding issues in connection with the protocols to envision a unified Africa and promote the creation of coherent regional value chains whose outputs will bear the proud Made in Africa distinction. This is how we will make it possible to market the continent abroad as a single investment area. Our ministers should also dedicate their full capacities to the continental imperative to shift away from primary production into value addition and advanced production in the context of a broader industrial base and product diversification. Similarly, you have been assigned the task of generating viable strategies to resolve Africa's connectivity deficit in order to overcome logistical barriers to trade. In respect of this assignment, and our chairman is here of AU, and I have the brief from my colleagues, heads of state, I encourage you to be ambitious and to demonstrate urgency. I hope our ministers are listening to me. I have been sent by your bosses. Please, don't let us down. Africa should be a hub for manufacturing. For example, active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are the main inputs for drugs and medicines, are plenty in our continent. Africa can be the source for all APIs. This ambition can and should be realized to cut down the cost of medicines and address our quality of healthcare. Many similar opportunities exist, and we must plan for these investments so that they can happen. Finally, it is very important that our ministers embrace the task of expediting the ratification of the protocols on the movement of people in order to support trade in services and free movement of business, especially business people, which is a critical factor of free trade. And I want to urge all of us, in the presence of our chairman, that as we go forward, we have demonstrated sufficient political will as policymakers. We want our private sector to equally pull their weight so that we can move together. We will be making additional interventions. We will be making additional steps. We are considering as AU, as heads of state, a mechanism where we can improve on the mechanism of the Africa Union, so that Africa Union can speak on certain matters for all of us as a continent. We can negotiate better if, as a continent, we can negotiate together. We should be able to negotiate together on matters trade. This is one area that countries must surrender some of its issues to the Africa Union the way the EU have done. We can do better than the EU. We can do better than other trading blocs. We have made the conscious decision that we want this continent to be the single trading market with a population by 2050 of 2.5 billion people and a GDP of $3.5 trillion. That commitment will unlock the tremendous potential that we have in this continent. And I am a great believer that the policymakers, the heads of state, will be able to provide the mechanism for us to be able to realize that great potential that exists in our continent. And secondly, we must also act together on matters of peace and security. It is not possible that this continent shall continue to be a place of conflict and war. What is going on in Sudan is unacceptable. What is going on in DRC is unacceptable. We must be able to work together so that we do not destroy our infrastructure, we do not destroy our resources, and we harness the full potential of the African young people for them to make progress, not make war. With these remarks, I now wish you all fruitful discourse and productive deliberations. I will be most delighted to receive reports of a successful African private sector dialogue and ministerial retreat. I must hasten to encourage all our visitors to find time and experience the singular delight of amazing people, wonderful natural attractions, and scenic beauty, as well as the incomparable flora and fauna that makes up magical Kenya. The African Private Sector Dialogue and Ministers' Retreat is now duly launched. Thank you very much. God bless you and God bless Africa. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for very wonderful remarks. A round of applause again to His Excellency the President. Your Excellency, you have made it clear that AfCFTA is going to make Africa the next global powerhouse. And you said AfCFTA will make Africa the manufacturing hub for the globe. This is a dialogue. Your Excellency, you've just launched the dialogue with the private sector. Your Excellency have also said that the AfCFTA implementation will only be meaningful if the private sector takes over, champion it. And you have exercised your political will. will you allow us, Your Excellency, 5 minutes to listen to the private sector voice so that it is a full dialogue? I received a yes. I will now invite the CEO of African Association of Manufacturers, Automotive Manufacturers, to come forward and make